If you're like me, you probably hate the thought of spending hundreds of dollars on plugins to get a good vocal sound. But good news, you don't have to. Today I'm going to show you how to get a studio quality vocal in Ableton only using its stock plugins. And once we're finished, we'll have a result that sounds like this. And the best part is you don't need any knowledge of music or experience to do it. Let's hop in. The first thing we need to do is record our voice. I'll get to the plugins that we'll talk about a little bit later, and I also have some really cool tips that will make your plugins work with absolutely any voice. But before we get into that, we need a recording. Vocal recordings are the part that most beginning producers skip over, but the part that professionals obsess over. If your voice sounds bad from the get-go, then no amount of processing magic is gonna fix it. Now, while you're recording, here's the biggest things to get right. The first thing is to sing in some sort of acoustically treated room. You can see some of the sound panels behind me, and you can also see that this is a nice dead space. And you can test that by clapping in any room that you're in. What you're listening for is the reflections dying quickly. In other words, they're not bouncing around the room. If you clapped in a church, you might hear the reverb tail. If you clapped in a gymnasium, the same thing might happen. That is the opposite of what we want for a vocal. If you don't have acoustic panels or some sort of treatment, the next best options are to sing in a clothes closet, or you could even prop up your mattress. I've done that many times and gotten good results from that. You also don't need that expensive of a mic. Today I'm going to be using the SM58. This is the first mic I've ever bought. It's been through some times, but it's still going to be everything that we need to get a great sounding vocal. We'll make sure our audio device is selected here, and then we'll click here, and we'll see that these green bars are going up and down. Great. Now, the biggest thing to make sure of as you're recording vocals is to make sure that this stays green. If it ever goes into the red, that means you're clipping, and there's nothing you can do after the fact to save it. Go back and re-record. To make sure that you're not in the red, you can just adjust the gain on your audio interface. On the mic, trying to lay it down. I got the rhyme, but it won't turn out. As you're recording, make sure you take multiple takes. This will be really important for the last most important step that I'll show you of this process. I'ma show you how to mix. And after you finish your recording, it's time to hop in to mixing. First things first, sometimes if you play all of your tracks together, you may notice that you're clipping on the way out. That's when you're going into the red on this master out channel, which you can find on this main. Check it out for the chorus. I think that's what's gonna happen here. I'ma show you how to mix. This is just gonna throw off our perception of the entire mix as a whole, and it's going to add some distortion. We don't want that. So let's take all of these tracks here, boom, boom, and we're just going to shift click and take them down so that when we play the chorus, we're not clipping. Now that that's not clipping, let's hop into pitch correction. In Ableton 12, they recently added a pitch correction, so I'll show you how I dial that in. Pitch correction is definitely genre dependent. You don't need it in every single genre, but if you want the effect, here it is, and here's how to use it. This video won't go into how to find the key of a beat. You can watch a video right up here that goes into more depth on that. But the key of the song is F minor. So we'll choose F as our root. We'll choose scale. We'll choose minor. Then we'll dial in this milliseconds here. The faster the auto-tune is, the more noticeable the effect will be. On the mic, trying to lay it down. Got the rhyme, but it won't turn out. When I spit in the mic. I personally prefer a more natural sounding pitch correction, but if you want something that's a bit harder, you can always toggle off this smooth, take the milliseconds down, and get something like T-Pain. On the mic, trying to lay it down. Now that we have pitch correction, let's move on to EQ. Go into Audio Effects, EQ, and drag on the EQ8 to our main vocal. EQ can be really intimidating for beginners, but it's not all that complicated. You can boost the high parts, the sizzle parts. You can boost the mud parts. But all of the moves you'll make will just give the vocal slightly different flavors. Because there are so many variables when it comes to recording your voice, such as the singer, the microphone, the room, the pitch itself, I can't give you an exact formula that will work on every single voice for EQ. But I can give you some general guidelines that I find myself doing on the majority of vocals I work with. Think of this as a good starting point for your own vocals and then adjust accordingly. The first thing I do on almost every vocal is use a high pass filter. You can do that by changing it to here. This is also called a low cut filter. This gets rid of any unwanted extra bass noise. Check it out.
I'm on the mic trying to lay it down.
If we cut too much, we'll get into the beef of the
rhyme,
vocal.
but it won't turn out. When I spit in the mic and I track these words, but I'm confused by the verse sounds worse, cause I'll bang my head, cause it's hard, it hurts, and I'm staring at the screen.
But even putting it right around here, I'm getting rid of those unwanted bass frequencies without taking too much weight off the vocal. The next move I do on the majority of vocals is to take away some of the mud. Mud usually happens between 250 and 750 hertz. Let's identify that mud by boosting it.
When I spit in the mic and I track these words, but I'm confused by the verse sounds worse, cause I'll bang my head, cause it's hard, it hurts, and I'm staring at the screen and feeling down.
You could hear a drastic difference between when I boosted those frequencies and when I took them away. A big factor in whether you'll want to boost this or not was how close your singer is to the microphone. The closer they are to the microphone, the more boominess and 250, 500 hertz they'll have in their voice. This is called the proximity effect, and it basically just says that the closer you get to a microphone, the more bassy your voice gets.
I'm on the mic trying to lay it down. I've got the rhyme, but it won't turn out.
And the last move I'll do on the majority of vocals is adding presence. Presence happens 8K and above. And if we use a shelf like this number 4 is right here, we can boost that up and hear more sparkle and more air in the voice.
On the mic trying to lay it down. I've got the rhyme, but it won't turn out.
The opposite happens if we take it away. The voice becomes duller and gets pushed back in
On
the
the
mix.
mic trying to lay it down. I've got the rhyme, but it won't turn out.
That's sounding pretty good to me. On this particular vocal, when I start singing in the higher part of my range, it sounds a bit shrill and harsh.
Let me show you how to mix these vocals right.
The biggest problem I'm hearing is an abundance of frequencies in the 4K range. This is really responsible for the harshness of a vocal. If you have too much 4K, it can sound a bit piercing, kind of like this voice does. If you don't have enough, it won't cut through the mix. Let me demonstrate.
Let me show you how to mix these vocals right. Let me show you how to mix these vocals right.
I think it sounds much better with that dip there. It's not as harsh, it's not as piercing, and it adds a little bit more body. Let's move on to compression. We can find compression under dynamics. The first compressor we'll add is just called compressor. Compression will help smooth out the big peaks that we have in our vocal. It will make the loudest parts of our track more similar to the quietest parts of our track. This is important for two reasons. The first is it's so much easier to mix if the volume is consistent. And two, it's going to make it so every word is clear and understandable. Modern vocals tend to have a lot of compression for both of those reasons I just mentioned. But there is a smart way to apply it so you don't completely squash the life out of your vocal. We can start by engaging the compressor by taking this line and dragging it down. We'll visually be able to see what peaks it's actually hitting. And you can see, for this first phrase, it's just hitting those two biggest peaks. That's great, we're slightly compressing them, but I'd like to hit this voice a little bit harder. You can see how much compression is actually being applied by looking at this yellow number here. I'm looking for around -5 decibels of gain reduction. I find that to be not too much, not too little, but just right. Of course, this absolutely depends on the voice, but I find -5 decibels a good starting point.
I'm on the mic trying to lay it down.
Now notice I'm already running into a problem. I'm looking for -5 around the entire vocal, but this entire phrase is very different volume-wise. These big peaks here are going to hit the compressor way more than these small ones. Let me show you a quick fix we can use to tackle this. The fastest way is to create a separate clip in Ableton using Command E. We'll double click on it and we'll just take the input gain of this down. You can do so by going here. And I'm just visually looking to make sure that it looks similar. The more drastic I go with this gain change, the higher chance it has of sounding weird. So keep that in mind. I sang this loud, so it should probably be a little bit louder than the other ones. Let's click back into our plugins by clicking here, and let's see how it's looking.
I'm on the mic trying to lay it down. I've got the rhyme, but it won't turn out.
Already sounding a whole lot better. We can do the exact same strategy for this little phrase here. We're going to Command E it. We'll double click on the top here, and this time we're going to boost it up just a smidge so that it's more similar to the others. This is a super simple strategy that's going to help the compressor sound more natural and keep the actual life of your vocal intact. The best time to use clip gain, like I was talking about there in Command E, is for phrases. If you have drastic volume changes in the middle of a phrase, it's best to use a different strategy. Take a listen to this phrase.
Let me show you how to mix these vocals right.
You can see some words are getting hit really hard and some words are getting hit not at all. We want to fix that. So to make this a little bit more workable, we're going to automate the gain of it. To do that, we'll double click here. We'll go into utility. We'll go into utility and we'll add it to the first part of our chain here. Then we'll click A on our keyboard to get into the automation. We'll want to select utility. We'll want to select gain. And now if we make points on this graph, we can change the volume over time. Check it out.
Let me show you how to mix,
And if you look down here as we go over it, you'll see that the gain actually goes up over time. This is called automation. It's something that pros are using everywhere. And what we can do in this case is we don't want to really boost here, but we want to take down some of these bigger peaks here. So I'm going to create some dots. And as we go, we want this to be down. -5 decibels probably sounds good. We're going to use our ears to make sure that it's similar.
Let me show you how to mix these vocals right.
Much better. And just like before with the clip gain method, you can go through the entire vocal or any time that it's hitting the compressor too hard. We can get into the next step of compression, which is adding another compressor. I like to add 2 compressors to do the job of just one. It's like using 2 people to lift a heavy couch rather than just one. It's just easier overall. No one has to do any heavy lifting. The second compressor I want to introduce to you in Ableton, which I really love, is the glue compressor. And we'll use this as our second one. We'll set the attack to 3 milliseconds, and we'll set the release to as fast as it goes. We'll keep the ratio at 4:1. I haven't talked much about attack and release times, but for now, the default settings in Ableton will be just fine for you. Dial in the threshold until we start getting some gain reduction. Once again, -5 decibels is a good starting point. Now, because we're taking away 5 decibels of gain, it's hard for us to know if this is doing anything. To make sure that it is, we're going to add makeup gain so that we can determine if it's actually working or sounding better.
I'ma show you how to mix these vocals.
I'm getting a little bit above 5, so I'm going to add in about 6.5. And then once I have the makeup gain about how much gain is being taken away, I can A/B test this. You can do this for every plugin that we've worked with so far, but it's a really good idea just to see if it's actually working. So I can turn off this glue compressor and then turn it back on to see if it's working.
How to mix these vocals right.
And with it on.
Show you how to mix these vocals right.
It sounds more present, it sounds more upfront, and it sounds more compressed. I think those are all good things. That is my core processing chain out of the way. Let's get into some reverb and delay. Ableton makes it really easy for reverb and delay, and it actually comes stock with some reverbs and delays bust for you. Click on these 3 dots here, or click tab on our keyboard. We'll get into this view. And you'll see here on each individual track, we have these sends called A and B. If you look over here, we can see what each send is. On send A, I have a hybrid reverb. If you look on bus B, you'll see that I have a delay. This means anytime I turn this knob up, I'm going to increase the amount of volume going to bus A. In other words, the more I turn this up, the more reverb will be on my voice. Check it out.
Let me show you how to mix these vocals right.
And then for send B, the same thing.
Let me show you how to mix these vocals right.
You can use any type of reverb or any type of delay that you want. If you're not quite understanding how to map these macros or how to save this preset, I actually have 10 free presets that you can go check out from my website below. It is the starter pack of my main version pack, but I've made hundreds of these presets before using all of these same ideas that I've been talking about and explaining. I think that you'll really enjoy it. Go check it out in the description below. That brings me to one of the most important parts about getting a professional modern vocal sound, and that would be vocal layering. In the beginning of the video, in the recording section, I told you to take multiple takes, and I hope that you followed that advice. Having multiple takes will give us more options, more energy, and more depth. When it comes to processing these background takes here, all that I did was copy over the main vocal plugin chain that we built on our lead. I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here. And then the next thing that we'll want to do is we want to click tab. We'll want to start panning these doubles and triples to the left and right. If we have one main lead vocal and then a double and then a triple of the same vocal, we'll get a lot more thickness than we would otherwise. I'll also add these quick and easy reverb and delay buses so that they're not completely dry. And let me solo these 3 so that you can hear what it sounds like all together.
Let me show you how to mix these vocals right.
Now, one thing that I'm hearing about these doubles is that they're a bit too loud. I don't want them to overpower the lead. I want them to support them. So I'm going to take these 2 doubles and just turn them both down in volume.
Let me show you how to mix these vocals right.
And there we go. We have a little bit of a blended sound with everything together. That is the basics of getting your own vocal to sound a whole lot better from home. If you run into any problems or it's not sounding like you want it to, leave me a comment down below and I'll be sure to help. And once again, if you want some more help with this, you should go check out my vocal preset starter pack. Download in the description below. But hopefully this is all you need to start making amazing sounding professional quality vocals without spending $5 million on plugins. I'll see you in the next one.